The key refused to turn. Ethan stood frozen on his porch, giving it another twist, this time with more force. But the lock held firm. His smart lock, the one he'd spent months fine-tuning, was gone. In its place sat a flimsy, rusted deadbolt that looked like it had been pulled from a junkyard. With his heart thudding, he pulled out his phone and launched the app for his security system. Nothing. No signal, no response. The backup key card? Also useless. He leaned in toward the door, eyes narrowing. Taped there was a crisp sheet of paper, the HOA letterhead impossible to miss. Your home access has been revoked due to repeated violations, it announced boldly. Violations? Ones Ethan had never heard of, never seen, never even imagined could exist. He just stood there stunned. His breath came shallow as he stared at the door of his own house. Across the street, curtains shifted. Neighbors were peeking. One met his eyes briefly before darting away like a frightened animal. This wasn't a simple lockout. Someone had broken into his home, dismantled his system, and changed the lock, all while he'd been at work. The nerve of it lit a fire in his chest, and deep down he already knew exactly who would dare to pull something like this. That morning had begun like any other. Ethan made his coffee, tossed kibble into Shadow's dish, and headed off to the cybersecurity firm where he designed unbreakable networks and top-tier physical security systems. His clients? Government level, not your run-of-the-mill suburban HOA. If anyone understood how to secure or bypass a lock, it was him, which made this intrusion not just bold, but almost laughably idiotic. Margaret Hensley, the HOA's self-declared ruler, had it out for him since day one. His solar panels, his discreet server unit, his refusal to follow her every petty rule. Each was a splinter under her skin. Her obsession with running the neighborhood had spiraled out of control. Still, Ethan had never expected her to go this far. Sure, he'd received her snarky letters before, full of petty complaints and nitpicks. Complaints about his unsightly tech setup, completely legal and neatly tucked behind a sleek panel, had arrived before. Ethan had always replied politely, assuming that would be enough. Clearly, he'd been wrong. He took a steadying breath and stepped away from the door. No shouting, no banging, no panicked call to 911. He was a systems guy. And this, just another problem to solve. He drove to a quiet cafe, opened his laptop, and got to work. Sure, the cameras were down, but Ethan had designed his surveillance to auto-back up to a secure, encrypted cloud server. Within minutes, he pulled up the footage. There she was, Margaret, barking orders in broad daylight, while some guy in a rundown van uninstalled his smart lock. Her voice crackled through a hidden mic Ethan had cleverly hidden inside a planner. Cut the wiring first, she snapped. Make it look legit so he can't sue. Ethan let out a short, incredulous laugh. They truly had no clue who they were dealing with. He could have called the cops right then and there, but Margaret would just hide behind HOA rules, bury him in bureaucracy. No, Ethan wanted more than just justice. He wanted exposure. He wanted her pride torn apart in front of everyone she loved to intimidate. So he started making calls to friends-in-law, tech, and surveillance, laying everything out. At the same time, he logged metadata and timestamps from the video feed. He contacted a locksmith, not to force his way in, but to prepare for a proper legal re-entry once everything was airtight. That night, he crashed at his friend Lucas's place, plodding over greasy pizza. His calm expression masked the storm boiling just beneath. Back in the neighborhood, Margaret was spinning a tale. Ethan, she claimed, was a dangerous rule breaker, hiding illegal surveillance equipment and refusing to comply with HOA guidelines. She proudly announced an emergency resolution to lock him out, convincing nervous neighbors to nod along. They didn't realize she'd skipped the vote, ignored the required paperwork, and made up her own rules as she went. She thought her role gave her power, untouchable authority. She was dead wrong. The next morning, Ethan walked past his house and discreetly slipped a small device behind a planter. It looked like a soil sensor, harmless and ordinary. But in reality, it was a directional antenna, silently tracking any tampering attempts with his hidden backup system. Margaret had wrecked his visible tech, sure, but what she didn't understand, she couldn't touch. His hidden systems were still active, quietly gathering data. By that afternoon, Ethan was ready. He strode into the HOA clubhouse, where Margaret sat playing Queen Bee beside two nervous board members. He dropped a stack of papers onto the table. His property deed, the HOA's own bylaws, and documented approval of his tech setup from years ago. Margaret feigned surprise with a smirk. "We were just about to reach out, Ethan." But he cut her off, his voice calm, cold. "You broke into my home, tampered with private property. That's criminal trespass." Her smile twitched. "We followed emergency procedures," she stammered. Ethan tapped his tablet. A video began to play, her barking orders to the contractor clear as day. Color drained from her face. One board member gasped. "When did this happen?" The other sat frozen, white as chalk. "That's just the trailer," Ethan said. "The feature presentation's coming soon." Margaret tried to recover, mumbling something about community safety, but her hold on the room was slipping fast and she felt it. That night, Ethan parked across the street from his home, watching his porch through a hidden camera feed embedded in the porch light. There she was, Margaret, creeping around with a flashlight, whispering frantically into her phone. Her hunched shoulders screamed panic. Ethan opened a secure folder, compiling every move she made. Trespassing, forged votes, false claims. He wasn't just back in control. He was about to blow the doors off every lie. The following morning, he sat in his home office, coffee in hand. Shadow curled up beside him. The rusty deadbolt was gone. His smart lock had been reinstalled, under the supervision of law enforcement. But Margaret's attack hadn't been about hardware. It was about power. She'd tried to seize control and violate the one place he called safe. So Ethan dove deeper. He cross-checked HOA rules with her claims. The supposed violations? Ridiculous. A fire code that didn't apply. A surveillance ban that wasn't written anywhere. He flagged every falsehood, pairing each one with corresponding county statutes, building an ironclad wall of proof. Then he examined the HOA's voting logs. The timestamps? Identical. An impossibility unless they'd been forged. The emails approving the lockout? Two came from suspicious, untraceable accounts. The domains used weren't HOA affiliated. No official .org addresses. A quick trace revealed something damning. The emails had come from Margaret's home IP. Ethan smirked. She hadn't just bent the rules. She'd altered digital records. That's felony territory. Evidence, hiding in plain sight. He immediately backed everything up, sent it to his lawyer, and called Sam, his old college buddy, now a digital forensics ace. Sam laughed out loud when he heard the story and promised a full forensic report in a matter of days. Back at the HOA clubhouse, Ethan calmly asked for the meeting minutes from the supposed lockout decision. Board member Claire hesitantly handed over a flimsy set of notes, vague, evasive, and carefully avoiding his name. "Did you actually vote to change my lock?" Ethan asked. She shook her head, whispering, "I didn't even know until after it happened." That was the final piece. Margaret had gone rogue, falsifying votes or strong-arming her way past due process. On his way out, he ran into Mr. Len, a retired mechanic. The old man muttered about Margaret's history, little scams like finding a neighbor over a birdhouse that was perfectly legal. The foundation beneath her throne was cracking. That night, Ethan deployed his next move, a fake Wi-Fi network, masked as HOA_security. It was deliberately flawed, bait, designed to lure in curious fingers, and it worked. Within hours, an outdated Android tablet connected. It poked around for credentials and attempted to upload a file named lockbypass.js. The signal traced right back to the HOA clubhouse. Ethan's pulse spiked as he watched it unfold in real time. Every keystroke, every attempt logged. Later that night, he cruised past the clubhouse, snapping long-lens photos. Tyler, Margaret's son, was bent over the same tablet. Papers littered the table, many with Ethan's name printed in bold. They weren't just covering tracks. They were building a lie, and it was already collapsing. Then came the email. Resident 99 Anonymous sent Ethan screenshots of a neighborhood group chat. Margaret had been bragging about neutralizing the tech pest. Ethan replied simply, "You've helped more than you know," and filed it with the rest. His honeypot kept logging. Tyler's sloppy code injections. Margaret's iPad pinged the network too, triggering a hidden mic. Her voice hissed, "This will shut him up." Say it's a safety concern. Her own words, now damning evidence, stacked neatly on top of the fake emails, the security footage, and the IP logs. Ethan met up with Sam downtown. Sam handed over the report with a grin. "You're going to love this. They didn't just screw up. They left digital fingerprints all over it. The altered domains, fake timestamps, and Margaret's sloppy use of proxy servers were laughably amateur. She'd even linked one of the forged emails to her coupon app." Ethan rolled his eyes and compiled everything, screenshots, recordings, and a tight timeline that laid out her entire scheme. He bundled it into a presentation and scheduled it to auto-send to every resident at 7 p.m. on Friday, prime email checking hour. The message closed with a line that made people sit up. "I was locked out, but who really holds the keys?" Then, with his lawyer and a county official at his side, Ethan returned to the HOA clubhouse. Margaret's face crumpled the second she saw them. The official handed over the packet. "You're suspended, pending investigation," he said. Margaret tried to fight back, but her voice cracked under the weight of the evidence. She was powerless. That night, Ethan sat on his porch, shadow curled beside him, watching his inbox explode. Dozens of neighbors were replying, outraged, demanding new elections, even asking him to run the HOA himself. He didn't respond. He didn't want control. He wanted peace. By Saturday, the neighborhood was in open revolt. Ethan's report was being passed around hand to hand. Margaret's image as the fair leader disintegrated like ash. Someone even dropped off a homemade pie with a note, "Sorry we doubted you." Ethan nodded. He wasn't done yet. A city inspector, tipped off by Ethan's lawyer, examined the clubhouse. What he found? Fabricated HOA rules and multiple code violations. Margaret didn't show. Her blinds were drawn. She was retreating. The board voted her out within 48 hours. Ethan filed a civil suit, not for money, but for discovery. That meant Margaret's devices would be subpoenaed and examined. Every fake email, every doctored record, exposed. Then came the hammer blow. The state HOA association launched its own investigation. And Sam, Ethan's forensics buddy, uncovered that Tyler had used forged credentials to mess with private surveillance systems. That was a federal offense. In court, Ethan played the audio clip of Margaret whispering about faking a safety risk. The judge didn't just approve full discovery, he hinted at criminal charges. Margaret shrank in her seat. The arrogance that once radiated from her was gone. Meanwhile, the neighborhood began to heal. Porch swings reappeared. Kids played outside again. Laughter returned. A new board led by Mrs. Carter, a retired teacher with zero tolerance for drama, took the reins and promised transparency. At a weekend potluck, neighbors gathered. Some thanked Ethan. Others simply gave him a nod, the kind reserved for someone who stood up when no one else would. He didn't say much. He was already thinking about running a small workshop on digital security. Maybe it was time to pass on what he knew. Margaret's house, once pristine, began to rot. The lawn went wild. Her mailbox overflowed. Her gear was stripped under court order,